So we might as well start with the numbers because the numbers are the story. Pun intended, because I just said 80,000. The numbers are the headline. Everything else this week is just decoration around this one collapsing pillar. The Social Research Foundation, working with the Common Sense and Victory Research, ran a proper telephone poll in Johannesburg in July. 504 registered voters, margin of error 4.4%. So this isn't some random online survey where 300 angry Twitter users vote in a poll. This is methodologically sound research. So what they found is the ANC sitting at 18% support in Johannesburg, the DA at 42%, more than double, MK Party at 13%, Action SA at 10%, EFF at 8%. You live in a reality where the MK Party is getting more votes, potentially, than the ANC. Now, here's the part that should genuinely terrify anyone still wearing an ANC t-shirt with a straight face. Back in March of this same year, the ANC was polling at 30% in Johannesburg. 30%. In 4 months, they dropped 12 points. That is not a slow bleed. That is not some gradual erosion you'd call the mere nature of politics. That is a party hemorrhaging support at a rate that should have every strategist at Luthuli House waking up in a cold sweat. 12 points in 16 weeks is not, "Hi man, you know what guys, we're just having a rough patch, things will improve from tomorrow." No, 12 points in 16 weeks is the wheels are actively coming off the car while it's still driving. This is very disturbing and very worrying. And even people who you'd think would want to defend the ANC's numbers are looking at this and genuinely going, okay, this is actually genuinely serious. This is serious. Sizwe Dlomo, a broadcaster not exactly known for being some radical anti-ANC crusader, looked at this poll and said, and I'm going to paraphrase him accurately here, his exact reaction was that even 18% might be too high an estimate for where the ANC actually stands. Think about that. The public reaction to the ANC is collapsing to 18% wasn't shock that it's so low. It was people going, yeah, if anything, that number is actually too generous. People genuinely believe that 18% is even too high. They think the actual results will be even lower because that's how frustrated everyone is with the ANC. When your own supporters, when neutral commentators, when the general public's gut reaction to catastrophic decline is, yeah, that's way too generous, I think they'll get even lower. That tells you the collapse isn't a surprise anymore. It is nothing but confirmation of what everyone has already suspected. The ANC didn't lose Johannesburg overnight in this poll. This poll just finally put a number on what everyone watching this city for the last 6, 5, 7 years already knew in their bones. The ANC would die. We might as well, while we're at it, talk about why Johannesburg specifically matters so much in elections. Because I know some of you are thinking, okay, Sama, it's one city, so what? No. This isn't just one city. This is the city that raised the Sama Sambit. Johannesburg is the economic engine of South Africa. It is Gauteng's own jewel. It is where the money is, literally, where the headquarters are, where the JSE lives, where so much of this country's tax base is actually generated. It is the city of Johannesburg. And here's one thing about Johannesburg, specifically for the ANC. They haven't held a clean majority there since 2016, a decade of coalition chaos, a decade of mayors coming and going like it's a revolving door. I think we've had, 7 or 8 mayors in Johannesburg in the last several years. The infrastructure has visibly, publicly, undeniably collapsed under that chaos. Potholes, you could lose a small car in, water outages that last weeks, electricity infrastructure so degraded that load reduction has become nothing but a permanent lifestyle rather than an occasional inconvenience. There are restaurants that center themselves around "we are the best" when it's load shedding. That's how bad things have gotten. Uncollected refuse piling up on the street corners in the country's supposed flagship city.
Welcome back. The decay of the Johannesburg CBD's administrative infrastructure has moved from a chronic concern to a national emergency. Following the high-profile abandonment of the Metro Centre and a series of fatal structural failures, a massive accountability drive is now underway, led by the National Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, alongside civil society oversight. Let's unpack this with Chairperson of the Right to Justice, Sipho Jele, as well as the spokesperson of the Gauteng Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in the Infrastructure Development Department, Theo Nkongi. And I'd like to start with you, Theo Nkongi. Thank you so much for your time, firstly, and a very good evening to you. This, of course, is no longer just a crisis. It's become a national emergency. How does your department allow this to happen?
It's 19 buildings that we have. And I know there's been a bit of fracas about, whether these are well maintained or not. And I think as we go on with the conversation, you will learn that due to the state of the buildings when they were acquired by the state and the resources and the limitations when it comes to resources in terms of maintaining those buildings and keeping them to modern occupational health standards, there was a bit of a shortfall there. And
I need to come in there, Theo. I need to come in there. That is quite the understatement when you call it a bit of a shortfall. Anyone who has been to Johannesburg City Centre will tell you that it being the seat of power is not working. As a provincial government, you are leasing buildings, you own buildings that you aren't using and are renting buildings rather, spending a whole lot of money. So I get the history behind it, and history is important, but let's stick to now. Why is it that your department has let this situation go on for this long? And more importantly, why are you leasing buildings when you have buildings that you own and aren't using effectively, such as the Metro Centre?
No, absolutely. So Masa, I just wanted to explain that, give a bit of background, but explain this very important balance that we have to strike as the Department of Infrastructure Development in the province. One, the state of the buildings that we acquired back in the days were never going to be in a good state for them to pass the muster of the now occupational health and safety rules. So you have seen quite a number of departments now being moved to leased buildings. And there's a proper rationale for that. And that rationale is that while we continue to, look for the money to upgrade the infrastructure that we have, obviously we have a difficulty in that we can't then tell every civil servant who works in the CBD to home while we solve that problem. So what we've done, we've decided to walk and chew at the same time. So we've said that while we then bring those buildings to a standard that is acceptable according to the new standards, we are going to lease certain buildings so that service delivery continues. So those head offices that we've had to lease out space for them, it was deliberately to deal with the fact that we couldn't interrupt service delivery, but we should also look at other ways of financing what is a huge shortfall in terms of maintenance of those buildings. These buildings are more than 50 years old. So that's a huge challenge. To bring to life, it will take quite an investment.
I think you've spoken quite a bit there. But speaking of the fiscus and the Premier as well, it was last year already in April where he said there'll be a probe into 34 million rand being spent monthly on leases. But this is where I want to bring in Sipho Jele, who's the chairperson of the Right to Justice. Sipho, you've just heard what Mr. Theo Nkongi has to say. What's your response?
Some of them are in a very bad state, but there should be a balance and a political will. So ours as a civil rights movement organization is that there must be a political will to make sure that government properties are utilized for what they must be utilized for. But in a case whereby they should be able to strike a balance and be able to lease out, there should be that will, and there should be balance between the different demographics represented in the business sector. So ours is that yes, there might be challenges, but there seems to be no political will. And I think at some point there's no strategy as to how can they be able to deliver in this regard, because you will have thousands and thousands of government properties in all departments, in all levels of spheres of government, from local, provincial, and national. But they are not utilized for what they must be utilized for, in order for them to be able to save on the fiscal budget and be able to redirect the monies to the services, to servicing the people of South Africa. But the other issue also is that maybe the oversight from their side is selective, because in areas where they must, the benefit or the building, the listers must benefit black business people, there's always problems. But where white people or white business people benefit, they are always smoothly benefiting without any issues. So there is no will from government from what we were viewed, and we think that their socks can be innovative enough to be able to utilize the buildings.
Just briefly, as you're concluding, Marks, as well, if you could just let us know about this conduction of an oversight visit to several of these government-leased buildings by NGOs, and how we've gotten to this point where NGOs have to now play this watchdog role.
Thank you very much again. One of the biggest problems that government has been citing as an issue is that NGOs have been a barrier of them when they try to take over on the hijacked buildings. So we've said that as proactive and progressive NGOs, we must also come to the flag and be able to assist government. But the issue is not only that there's been a pushback from civil movements, but also there's no way. What we've seen is that there's no cooperation from the different spheres. For example, in Johannesburg, you would have had a lot of disinvestments from the banks and most international companies who are based or housed in the city center here in Johannesburg. We've had interactions with FNB, ABSA, and Standard Bank who are complaining that the levels of crime, the levels of debt, and the depopulation of the infrastructure, the levels are so bad that they are thinking of moving out of the city center. Mind you, the city center is built to house all these multinational companies and the scores of people who are coming in as the business, as the central business district. But there's no appetite from government on fixing their problems and challenges that they're faced with. There are no street lights, so those who knock off late at night cannot be able to go freely to the nearest taxi ranks. Those who drive complain about possibilities of hijacks. There's debt everywhere. The local government is not picking up picking up the debt that is all over in the city center. So there's a multitude of issues, but it will seem that government is only focused on only providing business for those that they want to provide business to. But the state is so bad that in some areas you cannot have people coming into work on a day-to-day basis. So we've had also black business people complaining that the preference in this area of business is given to other minority groups, and they are not benefiting.
I'm sure Theo would have a lot to say in response, but unfortunately we have run out of time. Thank you so much to you both, gentlemen, for joining us for this conversation. That was, of course, the chairperson of the Right to Justice, Sipesi Tlejele, as well as the spokesperson in the Gauteng Department of Infrastructure, Theo Ngongi.
And through all of that mismanagement, the ANC has still somehow, through coalition arrangements and deals and backroom negotiations, managed to cling to some form of governing power in the city. This poll suggests that era might actually be ending. The tyranny of Johannesburg under the ANC is ending, because the DA is sitting at 42% and the ANC is at 18%. That is not a coalition negotiation anymore, where the ANC gets to be the kingmakers they always were. That is the Democratic Alliance, the DA, potentially being the outright dominant force, with the ANC reduced to fighting over scraps with MK Party and Action SA for who gets to be the ANC's replacement as the second-tier opposition voice. Helen Ziller who I think is going to be Joburg mayor in a matter of no time, has already been floated as a potential mayoral candidate if the DA's numbers hold. And if that happens, if the DA actually does take Johannesburg with anything close to a real governing majority come November 4th, that is not just a loss for the ANC. That is a symbolic execution. That's the ruling party of South Africa losing its own economic capital on camera in front of the entire country, in front of the entire world. And here's my thesis. Here's the thing I said at the very top, and I want to actually build the case for it properly. Once you lose Johannesburg as a ruling party, it is genuinely, structurally, mathematically downhill from there. And I'll tell you why. Johannesburg is not just a city. It is a signal. It is the biggest, richest, most consequential electoral prize in local government. And if voters there, voters who include a huge chunk of black, middle-class, working professional South Africans, not just some fringe demographic, if those voters are done with you, that tells every other municipality in the country that it's safe to be done with you too. Losing Joburg breaks the psychological spell the ANC has had on South Africa for many years. It breaks the ANC always wins eventually, right? It breaks that fatalism that's kept millions of South Africans voting out of habit rather than conviction for 30 years. And I swear to God, if this light goes out one more time, I will throw this recording system to the ground. Anyway, once that spell breaks in the crown jewel city, Joburg, and then Tshwane, and then Ekurhuleni, then Ekurhuleni, all of them will start looking a lot more vulnerable too, because voters everywhere start asking themselves, if Joburg rejected the ANC and managed to do it, why can't we? And look, the ANC's own internal analysis from groups like the Center for Risk Analysis is projecting the party heading towards roughly 30% nationally in these local elections. 30% nationally would already be a historic collapse for a party that used to pull 60%, 65%, even 70% in its most dominant years. 18% in Johannesburg specifically is worse than even that grim national trajectory. It basically means Johannesburg isn't just following the national trend. Johannesburg is leading the national collapse, the collapse we all need, the downfall and death of the African National Congress. It's the canary in the coal mine, except the canary is already dead, and the ANC is still down there whistling like everything is fine, and they refuse to acknowledge the problems. So yeah, that's the ANC. The ANC, in its former crown jewel, has been reduced to fighting for scraps and relevance against the MK Party and Action SA, rather than actually competing to govern. Write that date down, November 4th, 2026, because I genuinely believe that day is going to be remembered as one of the most consequential nights in post-apartheid South African political history. One way or another, the ANC is going to die. Good riddance. Good riddance. Bye. We're not gonna miss you. Bye.